Watercolor Christmas card tutorial, a snowy tree. To begin, we need to get the image on our watercolor paper. To do this, I'm going to take the drawing and color on the back to give me a graphite transfer. This is just a standard number 2 pencil. Once that back is completely filled in, I'm going to flip it over and trace over my line. And of course, another option is always to freehand it. Now that we have the image transferred on there, it's time to get our paints nice and wet. Remember, this is watercolor, so your paints are going to be very thin and liquidy. That helps with transparency, which is what makes watercolor so special. We do have a green in this palette, but it's not my favorite. So I'm going to be mixing some blue and some yellow in with it to make it a little bit richer. Make sure it stays on the yellow side of green, so that way we can have lights, shadows, and highlights throughout. Before I get any further, I'm going to take this needle tool and here in a second a toothpick, and I'm going to draw some lines in the surface of my painting. This is going to help create texture in the tree and give me some very fine lines for the watercolor to seep down into. Both work great for this technique, it just depends on what you have on hand. Now that I have those lines established, I'm going to continue with my painting. Remember, this is my lighter green. I'll be coming back with darker greens later. And I'm not going in a particular pattern. I'm just adding some green around my patches of snow. Now I'm going to deepen this green so that way I have some variation in my leaves. There's no particular pattern. I'm just going through and placing some more of this color and filling the tree in. I am concentrating a little bit more on the splotches of snow, so it's creating almost a shadow underneath it, but no true rhyme or reason. Now that we have a light and a medium, I'm going to mix some purple into this green to give us a darker green. Ordinarily with watercolor, I like to let all of my layers dry before I go back in this close together, but for this I want soft blending, so you'll notice that as you add these colors on top of each other, they'll mix organically and make a really pretty natural looking effect. You should start to see some of those lines appear, but I'm going to grab my toothpick and create some stronger ones while the paper is still wet. This will make even deeper and more pronounced lines. At this point, you can go back in and fill any gaps you forgot, or if you need to add just a little stronger color before we let it dry and start working on our snow cap. As you go throughout this process, make sure you're washing your brush really well so your colors don't mix in the actual cake. You want to keep those nice and clean. I don't want my snow to look too muddy. I want it to be icy and clean, so I'm going to make sure I'm using a clean space of the palette so I can maintain the color I actually want. I want that to be a nice icy blue, like I said, so I'm going to thin out blue with a lot of water and apply just a little bit to the top edge of that snowbank. I'm going to use the paper towel to dry my brush slightly. Like we did with the tree, it's not an exact science. I'm just going and adding a little bit of this blue around on the snowbanks in order to create some contrast between the background and the snow itself. To help convey a sense of patchiness, I am not really brushing in this paint, I'm just kind of daubing it. To add some more contrast and variation in the snow itself, I'm going to mix a little bit of red into that blue I've been using, as well as a tiny amount of green. This is going to help create reflections off the tree and make it a little darker to, again, have some of that variation. As you're going, don't forget to wipe off your brush if you're wanting to lighten and drag some of those colors around without adding color. This is an easy way to soften any of those harsh lines. Now for our star topper, I'm going to make sure my yellow is nice and wet, and then I'm going to simply draw in that star like I would if I were using a colored pencil, making sure that I'm really only using the tip of the brush to touch the paper. If you push too hard, then it's harder to maintain control. To complete my card, I'm going to get a red colored pencil and trace over the cursive lines that say Merry and Bright. A free digital download for the template is in the comments, and the music was found from mixkit.com.